when I talk about conference talk prep, as I mentioned, I'm going to be going to a conference next week, and well, we'll see what the level of quality of these presentations. Fingers crossed. But it certainly, if the organizations that they work for were to offer opportunities for them to practice before they get up there, well, maybe they won't have a bunch of slides chock full of text. Maybe they won't have slides full of a bunch of images and no one knows what image they're supposed to be looking at any given time. Maybe they would be told, don't read, look at your audience as opposed to your shoes. I certainly see that a lot at some of these technical conferences that I attend. This last point is one I don't think a lot of people think about. For perhaps those first three, well, yeah, those are obvious. Lunch and learn, conference talk prep, yeah, sure. But podcast guesting, what do I mean by that? Well, getting on a podcast as a guest is an excellent way for technical people to practice speaking extemporaneously because you're in conversation with the podcast host. The host is asking you questions, and you get an opportunity to practice answering them. In many instances, the host may even be willing to edit your answers in the event that you don't respond in the way that you would have hoped. But even if that's not the case, podcast guesting is still a low pressure way for technical types to practice speaking in front of others. And I'm a big fan of, even if at all possible, organizations developing their own podcasts. Because what that does is certainly it provides the opportunity in-house for these technical types to practice. But then other people who perhaps can't attend a lunch and learn can hear from these technical types to learn about what's going on, at least in terms of the product that's being developed within the organization. Well, what is being done with those products? The people that are actually working on them, what's their role? Because oftentimes we may assume things, but we don't know for sure. Now you get to hear from them in a podcast form, and podcasts you can listen to whenever you want. You don't have to go to go at a certain date and time like you would with a lunch and learn. So now we've gotten the feedback of the technical types and what they want to improve at, and in conjunction, of course, what the organization needs them to improve at. We provide the training, we provide them opportunities to practice. How do we know that this training worked, that it's producing the goals that we wanted? Recording presentations is really important to be able to listen back to them to see, well, what we wanted to learn from this presentation. Did we actually learn it? What this person wanted to convey, did they actually convey it? Because if you're relying on memory, it's going to be way more difficult to do that. Getting the audio transcripts is something that I thought about maybe a couple of years ago, and now I swear by it because I mentioned my mother being bothered by ums during that podcast interview. Now, when you look at the audio transcript, you can see them in black and white. How many times does this person say And if it's a lot, well, now at least you have a baseline to figure out, well, what do we need to do to minimize those numbers? And setting those goals are really important too. With regards to those ums, if you say 50 times in a presentation that's 10 minutes, well, now the next presentation that's 10 minutes, let's go for 40 ums. It's helpful in setting those goals is really helpful in just getting better at speaking. And then that survey data, that feedback, getting that information back from people in your audiences, and perhaps having it from a scale, for instance. Those questions I mentioned, is the presentation understandable, relevant, and actionable on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10? When you see that over time, those numbers are improving, well, then you know that this training, it seems to be working. So let's invest more into it.